we were very keen to do something to mark the 20th anniversary of the flight, which was this year. And as we say, we've kind of been interested in sort of slightly working with the image of the plane for quite some time. So it seemed a good opportunity to kind of bring this work together within the project Wilson One Stop View. So to mark the anniversary, we weren't able to put on an exhibition at that time, but we sent out an e-flyer and a kind of greetings card to mark the occasion, which was sort of sent out to arrive on people's doorsteps in a sense on that day. It all kind of landed to their space, especially in kind of slightly unannounced in the same way that Rust's plane arrived unannounced into Red Square.
So I think it was actually around 2003 or 2004 that after doing various kind of research and inquiries, we began to, we decided that one of the, in almost as a homage to the flight, or to kind of try and understand it more, we'd make a Cessna out of fabric, or we'd make a full-size Cessna. So we contacted an airport just outside Manchester, Barton Aerodrome, where there happened to be people who flew Cessnas in the flying club, and a pilot called Peter Smith gave us access to his Cessna 172, which was the same make as Matthias Rust's. So initially we went down and had a look at it, and then I suppose the thing that caught our imagination actually was the kind of fragility of it, even though it's obviously kind of a quite robust structure. When you get quite close up to it, you can see kind of inside and see the sort of the wires leading to the different areas of the plane, the wing flaps and things. So I suppose we wanted to kind of have a sense of fragility in the plane we made, and this is why, as you'll see later in the clips of our exhibition, it's a very fragile structure. It's almost a kind of collapsed plane, an empty shell. And it was also talking to Peter, we realised the kind of ambition of the flight and the kind of planning that must have gone into it. You know, because often the story is that he took off from Helsinki to Moscow, or that's the popular understanding of it. But he'd actually flown from Uetersen, just outside Hamburg where he lives, to the Faroe Islands, and onto the Shetlands, and to Reykjavik in Iceland. And for me, this is where there's a kind of his story that it was kind of premeditated and planned becomes legitimate, because he flew to Iceland, and while he was there, he went in search of the Hoffly House, which is where Reagan and Gorbachev met in October the 11th, 1986, which is actually 21 years to the day. In search of where they'd held this conference, which was the second one summit to discuss nuclear armament.
So this is a drawing that Sarah's made of the map of Europe, obviously. It's a little bit difficult to see it on this image, but it's got a kind of square, a red square, and a tiny golden symbol where he stopped off, and a little plane from where he started, and it kind of tracks his flight. So, and there was something about kind of making the plane and making this drawing about the kind of labour at the time put into making the artwork that we hoped reflected some of the time that he invested in that flight. It was 2 weeks long. It wasn't just a momentary decision to go and do that. So that's the little plane taken off from Hamburg. So that's part of the exhibition that we're currently showing in Denmark.
So that's the kind of finished aeroplane. And we traced each individual panel from the aeroplane and each individual rivet, and then kind of reconstructed it in fabric. And each seam and rivet is hand sewn. So it took us several years to construct the whole thing, and it includes all the details of the undercarriage, every kind of element. It's unfortunate that it's quite a difficult thing to photograph. It's only if you get closer to it that you realise the kind of detail in the structure. But this image is important because it shows the symbol and the insignia that Rust, when he was in Reykjavik before he then flew on to Bergen and then on to Helsinki, fixed to the aeroplane. And this was the one that Andy mentioned in the introduction, where he kind of invented a symbol that was attached to 4 places in the aeroplane. You can see it quite clearly on the tail. As it ends.
But it was actually something that we started to notice in images the more we sort of researched into it, but we didn't really find any reference to anywhere. But it was when we went to meet Matthias in Berlin last February or March, and asked him about it then, and he described that it was actually something that he kind of made himself as this sort of symbol of peace, I suppose, and placed it on the plane. So you say that in some ways, I suppose to us it kind of signified that the flying, or his kind of idea of it being a peace mission had been premeditated, even though that in some ways it's not clear. When we spoke to when we met Robin, he kind of said that there was not Matthias didn't make any mention of that as far as he could hear on his landing. There's no kind of mention of that within the film footage. But in some ways that's so we kind of quite focused on that, his symbol or logo as being something that kind of pays testament to that empire, but it was. He did set out with that mission in mind.
I think it's interesting that when he visited the Hofty House, which actually used to be the French consul, and it had in a doorway a sign RF, which referred to the French Republic. So I think that when you describe the symbol, it was kind of meant to represent liberty, equality, and fraternity. But it also, I think, kind of looks like a kind of nuclear weapon. One of the bombs. That's true.
So we've kind of taken that, the gold, almost, I suppose we've kind of slight tackiness of that symbol and used it throughout the exhibition, throughout the different elements of the exhibition in different ways. Some more detail of the plane. We kind of took the elements that I suppose kind of signified it as being particularly Rust's plane as opposed to any other cell, and they've kind of added those to the plane, so they're not kind of part of the actual element of it, so like the words on the side and the insignia. And it is quite interesting to know that it wasn't his plane, he borrowed it from his flying club, and it had to be returned to his flying club by the Russian afterwards. Part of the project, we've created this book that you've all been given a copy of on this publication, Flying Down to Moscow. And I think we hope that it kind of reflects the idea that the story of Rust isn't a straightforward one. Tonight's kind of given us extra evidence of that.